Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is a wonderful way to bring the Concordia community together for a wide-ranging geopolitical conversation with U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Kelly Craft and Leadership Council member and Director and President of the Wilson Center, Jane Harmon. Before we get started and I turn things over to Jane, I want to take a moment to ground this discussion in Concordia's mission of strengthening and supporting the partnering ecosystem. Now is a critical time for cross-sector collaboration, public-private partnerships, and a unified world. And that's why Concordia is reaffirming its unwavering commitment to maintaining its position as the leading nonpartisan convener alongside the UN General Assembly. We are hosting our 10th annual summit digitally this year as the largest and most inclusive gathering during UNGA Week, as they like to say, in New York this September. We are designing influential and substantial programming dedicated to a global response to COVID-19's immediate devastation and aftermath. And I encourage you to connect with our Director of Programming, who's also on this call, Kevin Wenzel, if you wish to be a part of the programming process. Finally, we are a member-based organization. And with that, we invite you to this program by Concordia due to the relevancy of your work to this topic. I encourage you to consider Concordia membership and to be part of this global partnership-based transformation. Before I pass it to Jane, a few housekeeping items so everybody knows what we're doing as it relates to this Concordia Live session. All attendees are automatically muted upon entry, but we hope that you'll take advantage of the chat feature to introduce yourself, engage throughout the conversation, and ask questions. We will have a live Q&A portion at the end of the discussion, and to ask a question during the Q&A, please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So not the chat function, the Q&A function. If we are not able to answer all of your questions in the regular program, Ambassador Craft has graciously offered her time and will compose written responses. If you would like to include your full name with your question, we will make sure to get those responses to you. The main discussion of this webinar will be recorded and available on Concordia's webpage and YouTube channel. The Q&A portion will not be recorded and is a special membership access benefit to those joining live. And now I'm going to pass the baton to Jane. She has been an active member of our Leadership Council and an invaluable resource to guiding Concordia as we continue to grow our community and increase our impact around the world. So Jane, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Matt, and good afternoon to people who love Concordia. You should, and people who want to learn things. We all do. And I just want to salute you for what you said. Concordia is a very significant convening platform. You did the boldest thing by walking into UNGA territory during the UN General Assembly some years ago and basically taking over the convening space in New York. That is not easy to do. And I got interested in Concordia then. I'm a proud member of your Leadership Council. I also happen to head, and it's behind me, the picture behind me is the Wilson Center, which is another convening platform think tank, living memorial in Washington, D.C. And we partner with you, which I love doing. And we've partnered on security, foreign policy, gender parity, leadership in Africa, and a variety of other things. And this. So just saying, I'm a Concordia fan. I know you hate to hear it, but I thought I'd put it out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now for the main act, talk about UNGA. We would call Ambassador Craft the UNGA it person. However, there will be only virtual UNGA this year and virtual Concordia. And I think it's great that you're on this in this conversation early so everybody can kind of focus on some of the issues. And I think this is your first time. Let me get when you were nominated. This will be your first UNGA as doing about second one. Second one. Yeah, that's right. 2019. Time flies. Here, I have it right in front of me.
I think I landed. I think I landed in New York 2 weeks before, and it was just boom.
Well, yeah, but you're a very experienced professional, so 2 weeks is plenty of time. And congratulations on the position you hold. But Ambassador Kelly Craft was nominated by President Trump to the position of representative of the United States to the UN in February of 2019. That's right, and confirmed July 31. So, right, she just had a short time. And you were sworn in by Mike Pence on September 10. So that's just of last year. So that's just 2 weeks before UNGA. And we had an actual UNGA last year. You also served, and I know this because that's when we met, as the first woman ambassador from the U.S. to Canada from October 2017 until you were appointed to the UN role in 2019. And during your time there, you did some significant things. I'm going to ask you about one. But one of the things you did that's close to my heart is you worked closely with the Canada Institute at the Wilson Center. And we love you, and we're inviting you back to talk about many things you did in that role. But let me start. Oh, and let me also mention your background before the UN in Canada. You're a third-generation Kentuckian. You served your community by assuming leadership roles with the Salvation Army of Lexington and the Center for Rural Development, a nonprofit dedicated to the economic development of Kentucky, and many other roles in cultural leadership in your state, working with the Kentucky Arts Council and the United Way of Bluegrass. You were an alternate delegate to the UN General Assembly appointed by President Bush in 2007. Okay, so now let's start with Canada, because I was just saying to you and to Matt that as a recovering politician, having served my 9 terms in Congress, I've been dismayed by the lack of bipartisanship in the Congress. I think so much more could get done if both houses worked together between parties in each house and together between the houses. And one singular accomplishment, other than some response to the COVID-19 crisis, was the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. You were in Canada when it was negotiated. It became effective on July 1, just a few days ago. It's a major diplomatic achievement. Kudos to the Trump administration for its leadership role in negotiating it. And I just wonder, just because I think everyone's interested, what are the challenges going to be to implementing it?
Thank you, Janie. You know, first of all, you speak about bipartisan work. This took more than just bipartisan within our own Congress. If you think about, we have the Canadian administration and the Mexican administration. So this was a lot of obviously different rules of engagement, different voting times, methods within all of our governments, the 3 governments. So I found that particularly interesting, that everybody's timing was different. And so not only did we work together really well within U.S. Congress, but we had to have an outreach like no other. So I have to give all the credit to Ambassador Lighthizer, who's our USTR, our trade rep, and the president, because the president knew this file as if well, you know, he ran on this. He's been talking about about NAFTA for many, many years. And he ran on the fact that we want to mine our own. We want to keep it within the border of the United States. And once we highlight our own economy, then we can be more useful and respectful and integrated and have a better supply chain with the 2 closest economies to us, Mexico and Canada. And, you know, my role was really to make certain that I kept the channels of communication open between, at the time, Foreign Minister Freeland and now she's Deputy Prime Minister, and Prime Minister Trudeau. So they were in an election year. So we know very well now what that is like when you're negotiating anything in an election year. You know, the thing with Canada is Canadians have choices. And I think if anybody ever thinks that they don't, that's a huge mistake.
Right.
They had choices that they made. The Prime Minister made choices during an election year. And you know very well, Quebec with all of the dairy farmers, those were some tough choices. I come from a tobacco family, my grandparents, so I understand subsidies. I understand that pride. And that's just one of the areas that I really saw him. He underwent a lot of pressure during an election year. I always remember, because Quebec, as you know, was one of his biggest constituencies. So I grew to really respect him, because he was looking more into the future for generational values instead of just that moment of a vote. And, you know, and they had a choice, and he made a choice to do what was best for, obviously, Canada, but then to keep our supply chain healthy. with Wisconsin, Michigan, all those. So I learned a lot from Canada. The main thing I guess I really learned was the value of culture, because their culture file was so important, Jane. And being a Kentuckian and having that particular culture here, especially from Eastern Kentucky, I really never gave that a lot of thought. It's like storytelling. That it's a big deal for them. It should be a big deal for all of us, right?
Well,
I learned so much from their focus on different files. Obviously, we all knew the auto, we all knew agriculture, we all knew a lot of the cybersecurity, a lot of the labor rights. But who would have thought that culture was going to be a main focus?
Well, it's a very interesting observation. And as an ambassador, that for sure is part of your file, is to understand the culture of the country you're in. And what interests me, and we'll go on to some questions about the UN because that's your current file, is that the leadership of both Canada and Mexico, in addition to our leadership, fought for something that I would call a win-win-win. Every country benefits. It wasn't a win-lose. And cross-border trade is crucial to both borders, the northern and the southern border. Technology upgrades to NAFTA were overdue by about, at least a decade. I mean, NAFTA was a 19th century kind of agreement in terms of the way you could, as an example, something you would understand in business, sign documents. Now you can sign documents on the web, which we all do, but that wasn't permitted under NAFTA. So we just did some programming on this at the Wilson Center. And it's very exciting. And thank you for the role you played. I'm sure we're going to keep asking you about it because you're invested in it. And that's a good thing. And it's, it is right to be proud of things when they finally work, given the way Congress has sadly not worked very well. So let's move along to the UN.
Okay.
You were just saying offline that you were in New York recently to visit what is basically the virtual UN, but you thought you should show up. What is it like when most people aren't there? And I guess doing Zoom calls all over the place. But just tell us what a day looks like when you went back to New York.
Well, so when just a day looked the same as far as Security Council meetings, because everything is virtual, and we have, it's been a lesson that we've all had to work together because it's a UN platform. So it's not like a Zoom call or something that we're all familiar with. So all of us had hiccups. I mean, all 15 of us. So, we work, we get up and we have council meetings normally from 10 to 1, and then there's a break, and then from 3 to 5, and then in between are phone calls. So, and the phone calls a lot of times are Zoom meetings just between an ambassador and maybe 2 or 3 people. So, but in New York, we had voting for the Security Council members, the 5 incoming members. And I felt it was very important because we had made such a big decision with the Secretary General about whether to vote in person, whether to do a drive-by vote. And I just thought it was really important for all of us to show our interest in the importance of becoming part of the E10. So I felt I needed to vote in person, and they had time slots for each of us. It was very documented. It was very protected. Just myself and one other person could go in with me, and then I had to walk in by myself into the GA. So here I was in the GA with maybe 2 other countries that were voting, but we were all spread way apart. And it was like clockwork. And then we obviously had a tie. So we had to go back in and vote again. It was Kenya and Djibouti. And we were back in to vote again the next day, which was the same process. So I was able to connect with the Russian PR and some other members of the General Assembly, some other member states. Right. And that was refreshing to be able just to say hello in person. We're going to start back our meetings. We're going to have a little trial run on Tuesday, the 14th in the ECOSOC chamber, which will allow for us to have social distancing. And we're only going to be allowed 1 person with us. So, I've missed having that one-on-one relationship because I have become quite close. I don't know if you knew that I had the Security Council to Kentucky in December because the U.S., we were the president of the Security Council. So you try to think of a creative thing to do. And I thought, I'm going to bring them home.
Yeah.
And it was it couldn't have happened at a better time, because who would have thought, here we were in March, everyone separating. And so everyone but two came to Kentucky for 3 days. And it was just a wonderful time to learn about, Kentucky history, learn about the global supply chain and where Kentucky is in this mixture. And just to have that diplomacy at home. And I think when you remove people from a chamber or from New York City where it's so busy, you can really allow people to focus on one another. So it was very helpful for now, because now I have that relationship.
But the composition of the Security Council is changing. Mm-hmm. And I know that there was a very embarrassing vote for your former Prime Minister of Canada, because Canada was not admitted. First of all, tell us about that, but also tell us about whether you've met the new members, the representatives of the new members to the Security Council. And is it weird that you can't form those human bonds because all you can do is zoom around?
So, the most important part about Canada, Norway, and Ireland, first of all, they're all three very strong. I know all three ambassadors, but obviously with Marc-Andre, he was the first dinner party that I chose to attend because of my relationship with the Prime Minister and with Chrystia Freeland. He served Kentucky Fried Chicken at dinner that day, by the way. That's just who
and
he
bourbon?
is.
Did he serve
but
bourbon?
He did. He served,
good.
what he served was the dessert, bread pudding with bourbon. So he was on it. But, the most important part, he ran a very strong, solid, factual, thorough campaign. So there is nothing to be embarrassed about at all. We need Canada in the General Assembly as much as we needed them in the Security Council. So, I feel and I told Marc-Andre, you absolutely should hold your head up very high, because, the way they campaigned, and I have to say, you have to give it to them, because most people think, well, they're our allies and friends, so they must be really, we must have them in our pocket. Well, that's not the situation. And I reminded everyone, they have choices. Obviously, yes, those of us who are close to Canada were disappointed, but they're so important in the bigger scheme. And that's what I'm focusing on with Canada. There's just so much they can do within the GA that we need. And Ireland and Norway, we have two fantastic, new additions, and both of which are females. So I'm very excited about that.
Have you met those?
Oh, yes.
Those representatives?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you know most of these folks.
Oh, yes.
I mean, as you know personally, not just
when I arrived,
Zoomerly.
I know them personally. When I arrived at the UN, I will say to you that George W. Bush gave me some great advice. I went down and met with him, and we talked about his dad and his father's time at the UN, because I really wanted that advice. I'd met with Susan Rice. I had, talked to Nikki at length. And so the former president invited me to come down, and he just talked me through the way his father, that personal touch.
Right.
And I've always been a person that writes handwritten notes. So I had that one covered, but he said, you should reach out to reach out to the countries. Don't let them reach out to you, and reach out with some of the smaller ones first.
Great.
And that's what I did. His dad did that. And it really,
no question.
It's goodwill. Question. You know what? And that's what we're all about is sharing goodwill with other people. So I felt like, the other members, it's Mexico, India, Kenya, and there's just such a great relationship there.
Good.
That, and plus I was so lucky to have that relationship, especially with the Indian ambassador in Canada, who has now retired. But so I immediately had friends, the Mexican ambassador in Canada and the Norwegian ambassador in Canada, and I were running partners. So I had an instant friend when I got here. So it just shows you what diplomacy will be with you forever. Goodwill stays forever.
Well, some people, Joe Nye at Harvard coined the term soft power. And I am a huge proponent of soft power. You obviously are too. You're a practitioner of soft power. It pays in dividends. I mean, if people know us and they know our generosity and they know that what we're trying to achieve is something good for us and good for them, it's amazing what we can get done. I hope Congress
and we want everybody to be part of a winning team.
Yeah. Right.
And you know, when I'm trying to talk about an idea or a vote that may not necessarily be the way that they're normally voting, if you believe in something, you want everybody else to be on board because you want them to be successful and have that success.
I couldn't agree more. Let me
You know,
ask you
so
that. Yeah, some of the hard questions though, because
yeah,
I'm sure those listening in want to know. Let's
okay.
talk about Israel's possible, it hasn't happened yet, annexation of parts of the West Bank, which, as you know, are viewed with have mixed reviews in our own country, mixed reviews in Israel. My question to you is, how is the bigger either the Security Council or the bigger UN seeing this possible move, and what are you doing with respect to it?
Well, you know, coming into the UN, I mean, I made it very clear that I stand with Israel. I will always be a firm advocate for Israel. And I also stand for the Palestinian people. I mean, you heard the president in January of this year when he announced the Vision for Peace, that he spoke with Abbas. He understands their plight. You know, he wants them to be economically sound and secure. But at the same time, we can't allow Israel to be bullied at the UN. And that's where I keep my eyes wide open. I try to be very fair. You know, the U.S. we're not here to set something in stone. Our vision for peace is just guidelines. It's just a roadmap that just a beginning, you know, it's just a sketch. And they have to fill in the colors. They've got to fill in all the boundaries. But we just want to bring the two of them to the table because we care about the region. And it's more than just the Palestinian people in Israel. It's the entire region. I have a nice relationship, obviously, with the Israeli ambassador, and we'll be having a new one coming in, but also with the Palestinian ambassador. And I think it's really important that for me, to encourage a dialogue. That's the only way we're going to know what each side wants. I mean, the Palestinians need to come to the table so that we can hear what is it that you need? What is it that you like about the vision for peace? What did you don't? Because this is just a starting point. This is just a conversation starter.
Well, you're talking about the Vision for Peace, which is a proposal of the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the possible unilateral annexation by Israel of parts of the West Bank which have not been negotiated with the Palestinians, and which the Palestinians oppose, so far as I can tell, and which parts of our own country oppose. That this is an Israeli move. I'm not trying to project that. I'm wondering if what can you do, or what are you thinking of doing about this possible annexation piece? Is that going to make your job harder selling the other proposal? Or
it's really not. It's not up to me to sell it. Yeah, it's really, obviously, I'm taking the discussions that are coming to me, and I'm taking them back to the administration, because this is something that with Jared and the president, it's a very private discussion. Obviously, we want what is going to work for the economic success of the Palestinian people.
Good.
And for the security, the peace and security of Israel. So, we are, just so that everyone understands, it is something that is being discussed daily. What is best for both areas, both regions. It is not going to be easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't even have to have a vision for peace, right? Well, so I'm just here to build that relationship. And you better believe I hear, from not just Israel and the Palestinian people, but from everyone at the UN's engaged in this. But the one thing I can't allow is for there to be unfair bullying within the UN system for any country, especially for Israel.
And I would just add that U.S. policy for years and years has been to support a two-state solution negotiated by the parties on the ground.
Right.
That is still, speaking for me, what I think would be in the security interests of both sides and the region. Some are saying that's going to be impossible if this unilateral annexation of part of the West Bank happens. But I applaud you for keeping the dialogue open, the lines of communication positive, and maybe something will come that will be embraced by both sides, and I think in everybody's security interest. I hope so. Let me turn. Go ahead. Did you want to respond to that?
No, I'm good. Good.
Okay, refugees. The humanitarian crisis in Venezuela continues. The humanitarian crisis both in Syria and hemorrhaging out of Syria continues. I was fairly recently in Jordan, which now has, of its population of 10 million people, 3 million of them are refugees, not all of them from Syria, but Jordan is housing and feeding and trying to assimilate millions of people. I mean, imagine if 30% of the US population were refugees from someplace. What are you doing, and what is the UN doing with respect to these, incredibly tragic and really politically destabilizing crises?
So, it's really appropriate for you to bring up Syria, because we're getting ready to have a very important vote between now and the deadline for the renewal of the 2 border crossings is on Friday. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I'm going to compliment Jordan and the areas that have taken in the refugees, because Jordan has asked for nothing. They just want to do the right thing. And that is taking in people that otherwise would have absolutely nothing. I mean, and this is a matter between life and death. The border crossings, what we have asked for are 2 of the existing border crossings, Baba Hawa and Baba Halam, to remain in existence, because that's the only way we're going to have humanitarian aid delivered. We've asked for the 3rd crossing, which was closed, shut down in January by the Russians, Al Yarabia, which is in the northeast, and that's where most of the medical humanitarian aid comes through. Mm-hmm. That's how we get the aid into Idlib. What we're going to do is we're going to shine a light on the Russians or the Chinese, because they're pushing back on us. We're moving straight ahead. I'm not focused on this rogue regime, Assad. I'm focused on the Syrian refugees. I don't know if you know that I just traveled there before the shutdown. I was in Turkey on the border at Baba Hawa. I saw for myself the way that President Erdogan has, on the Turkish side, has given the refugees human dignity. Good. And when somebody has human dignity, they know they can make it, right? And not only that, he's given them a pathway to citizenship. They have these block homes. So they have, the husband has a home to come home to, and he feels that pride because he's working. There's just nothing more important than human dignity and knowing that you can go home. And then, of course, on the other side are thousands, millions of refugees, especially in areas where there's just maybe a 6-mile square radius where you've got people living. And if you think about COVID right now, so let's think about the pandemic, and you're telling someone, okay, you're going to have to shelter in place with you and your 5 children. Where are you going to shelter? Right. You're sheltering in a tent with about 300 other people, or social distancing. That's impossible. And people are having to make really crucial decisions. A mother will make a decision between purchasing hand soap or feeding her 5 children. Well, you're going to feed your 5 children. I have a personal agenda with this. I've been there. When I arrived, I left politics on the plane. And when I left, I brought the emotions back with me. I brought every single person, every set of eyes that I looked into, every conversation that I had. It is a dire humanitarian crisis. The starvation, if you look at David Beasley and read what he's written about recently with the World Food Program, and Henrietta Ford, whom I know you know, with UNICEF. Very well. And wonderful look woman. Is she not such a role model? And you look at, let's just look at Michelle Bachelet. She herself said it is a crisis. We have to have the 2 border crossings. I'm going to corner Russia. I want everyone to know that if and when we do not have these border crossings, there's no other person to point to. Those lives, there's going to be mass graves, and it's going to be on them. Yeah. And every day.
And a lot of them kids. I was in the refugee camp on the Jordanian border with Syria. I can't say enough about Jordan punching above its weight. I've said it for years. And about 85,000 people are there. And the rest of the millions have been assimilated into Jordanian society where they have jobs. But the camp has dignity too. And what's scary is the birth rate is fairly high. And so we're talking about young human lives, and who will either possibly die of COVID or something else, but who won't be educated and will be marginalized, at basically zero. And I couldn't agree more with everything you're saying. Can we just take a minute and also talk about Colombia, the country, which is being saturated by refugees out of Venezuela? It's another huge human problem, and Colombia is doing its best too to house them and care for them.
So when you're talking about the children, I mean, and we'll move on from Jordan, but just once again, you've been there, you see what the Jordanians are doing. It's amazing. But you're procreating, so you're developing, you're hopefully going to have another generation. They're not being vaccinated. Let's forget about COVID. They're not even being vaccinated for measles, mumps, just for the normal childhood vaccinations. And that's the same as I'm seeing. We were in Colombia. Colombia, all of the border countries around Venezuela have taken on refugees, Colombia being the one that's really taken on the real burden of the most refugees. And obviously they've got the border there in Venezuela that they're walking over. I was on that border. I saw them, thousands a day, thousands come over and back, and they walk sometimes for a day or two just to get over the border to have food and medical supplies to take back to their families. About 5,000 or 6,000 end up staying and becoming refugees. But Colombia, I met with the president, and he is determined to provide a safe haven for them. But you have to watch after your own people. They've got their own problems.
Well, that's true
poverty.
In Turkey, and it's true in Jordan too. It's amazing that some countries step up, and when they do, we have to call them out and compliment them. And I appreciate
and we got to call out all of it. Yeah, and we got to call out all of the different countries that have been with us every step of the way in recognizing Guaido as the president. I mean, the support that he needs in the encouragement for a peaceful democratic transition. I can't say enough about the countries, the Latin America countries that have been with us every step of the way. I met with the president of Peru, the foreign minister. I cannot stress to you how much Brazil, Peru, Colombia, all of these countries are doing in order to really stress to Guaido that, we honor you as president. You need to really move toward fair elections, because this is a dire situation. We have Russia, we have Cuba, they're providing the military, they're propping up the Maduro regime. Russia, people are flying in different military equipment. Iran is engaged there. We have to really call out these bad actors. So I don't care about what's going on right now. We can't lose sight on these regimes that are aiding and abetting Maduro, and for that matter, Assad, and for that matter, the Houthis in Yemen. I mean, we've got so many issues going on that this COVID is preventing us from, sometimes you lose your focus, and that's what I can't do, and I won't.
Well, no, that's right. That's what you can't do. You obviously have enough passion to go around the whole world, and I salute you for it. So let's turn to another topic we haven't raised yet, Hong Kong. And the National Security Act, just enacted by China. We used to have one country, two systems. I think we're moving to one country, one system. What are you doing about this issue at the UN?
So that China, signed with the British an act that which they would allow the one country, two system. Hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah,
and
you are.
I had a really difficult time bringing that forward to the Security Council. I mean, even countries, you'd be surprised that just like, well, it really doesn't belong here. Well, yes, it does belong there. It is a human rights issue. China, the Communist Party in China, the General Secretary Xi, they know what they're doing. It's another human rights issue that's going on. So I worked very closely with the UK Chargé, Jonathan Allen. We were able to bring that to shine a light in the council. It was not easy. You can imagine China's response,
Right.
but to shine a light on what the People's Republic of China and how they're undermining multilateral institutions. They're undermining the interest of democracy. I mean, it is amazing what they're hiding, what they're doing. You know, they were coming after me at that point. Was right when it was such an unfortunate situation that Mr. Floyd died, and China was using that. They were using George Floyd. Can you imagine, to come against me? And I said, look, I'll debate you any day of the week. Let's compare the fact that we are allowing free speech. We will get to the bottom of this. We will arrest those people responsible. What are you doing for the Africans? What are you doing for the Muslims, for the Uyghurs? I'm happy to stand side by side and have a debate on this. And we are going to continue. I'm going to continue to shine a light on Hong Kong. You know, with their leadership, we need to support her. We need to be very supportive of the people there. They're innocent people. But one thing we will not allow happen, and we will use every tool available for anybody there that is trying to abuse the rights of the Hong Kongers.
Well, the experts at the Wilson Center tell me that China views this as a domestic issue.
Yes, they do.
Doesn't see it as a human rights issue, and is just not, at the moment, not being deterred by increased economic sanctions or anything else that we're doing. And surely there's a tragedy here, because Hong Kong was a beacon to the world as a very modern society. And I think the system we had, one country, two systems, was working well for everybody and was accepted by the United States as an appropriate description of where Hong Kong was. And now I fear, and the folks at the Wilson Center fear, that gorgeous city is going to be destroyed by this. And
I have to say, and you know this very well, the U.S. has been forced by China to take actions to protect our national interest. And this does belong in the Security Council, because it's a national interest of all of that entire area.
Yeah.
And, they're going to move on to Taiwan. It's amazing how they've used this COVID, this virus, and that's a whole nother story in itself, Jane, but how they've used this virus to kind of shield themselves while they're working on, with Hong Kong, while they're trying to take over, while they're taking Taiwan. I can't get Taiwan recognized because they continue to block. They don't want anyone to feel democracy.
Well, the Taiwan issue is a very old issue, and the strong leadership there, certainly, again, it's getting support. Taiwan is getting support from the United States.
Yes.
And I see, so do you. You see what's happening with COVID going on, and people and leaders of various countries seizing more power unto themselves and for longer periods of time. And we don't have time to talk about it. I want to ask you about one other issue, and then one final question before we go to questions from the audience. The other issue is that you're seeking to persuade the Security Council to extend Iran's arms embargo, which expires in October. What are you doing there, and what are the chances of success for that?
Well, we have started very early because we know the importance of an October 18th. What we're focused on is the fact that everyone is in agreement that we don't want on October 18th to wake up on the 19th and Russia and China and other countries to be selling equipment to Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And for Iran to be taking that equipment and then taking the inner workings and making their own, and then providing those to their proxies. It's going to affect the entire region. This is an issue that everybody in the council, we've been working very closely. The Europeans are in lockstep with us. Obviously, we are working very closely with Russia. I mean, I know that at the end of the day, everyone there is concerned for their own safety and security. And I will use every tool in my toolbox to make certain that the world knows that we have to renew the arms embargo.
So my closing question to you, Kelly, is whenever it is that you leave this post, what do you want your legacy to be?
It's not really my legacy as much as it is my predecessors and how we built upon one another. So I'm really nothing without the people that have been before me. And that's Democrats, Republicans. So you build upon one another and you build upon best practices. So my legacy is really building the diplomacy that has been handed to me. I'm just a person, but it's the post that matters. That's the legacy we want the U.S. UN ambassador to have, a legacy. And, I've tried to take the best practices from George H.W., from Susan Rice, from Samantha Powers, from Nikki Haley, I've read and just researched and made phone calls to Susan. And, anybody that can tell me best practices, I don't have to take them. But there's goodness in every administration, and I'm taking the goodness. So I want to be known as somebody who's building upon. I'm not going to reinvent something, but just build upon what my predecessors have done, because I want someone to build upon refugees from me.
Well, brava to you. And let's not leave out Madeleine Albright, who came before.
Yes,
There have been a lot of women ambassadors to the UN, and you build, you're right, on a legacy of passion and commitment, and good for you. Over to you, Matt, for questions. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you, Jane. My pleasure.